Good morning students and welcome to the Hindu Analysis by BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Now before we start with this analysis, here is a very quick reminder that today under our Target Prelims 2023 program, we'll be having the second session of Indian Polity, which will be held for 2 hours between 7:30 to 9:30. So do not forget to attend the session to get amazing marks in your prelims exam. Here are the various articles that we'll be covering in this particular session. First is Government Mulls, Unified Airport Security, None Too Soon, Article 200 and Governor's Discretion, the Women's Reservation Bill cannot wait any longer, IMD predicts more heatwave days for Eastern India in May. Under the prelims bites, we'll be covering the core sectors of the economy, the 8 sectors. The recently a report has been released on the same. Then we'll be discussing about Raja Ravi Verma and what is his importance in the Indian painting sector. So we'll start with the first article, that is the Government of India. It is mulling the decision on having a unified airport security that is equivalent to the TSA, that is Transport Security Administration in USA. Okay, so recently in January 2023, the Prime Minister of India had given a green flag for this, that yes, we can have such an authority. Now in the BCAS, that is the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security, its raising day was there yesterday, under which the Secretary for Civil Aviation has also asked the various members to think about this thing. What is the need for it? What is the importance for it? What is the TSA of USA? And right now, who covers the security for the Indian airports? We'll take a look at that. So we have already covered that the government wishes to establish a single security agency. Now this security agency will be for aviation security, for customs and immigrations, and apart from that, eventually it will also start covering the other transport sectors that include the shipping, the metro, roads, railways, and land and sea ports of India. So currently, what is the status? How the security of the airports work? So we have the BCAS, Bureau of Civil Aviation Security, which frames the various regulations, the requirements for security at the airports of India. Now this is the policy formulation body. The implementation body is different. It is either the CISF and the airports of India. Now when the regulations say that we need to upgrade our security status, we need to upgrade the machinery, so the regulations, they give basic frameworks that need to be adopted. However, many a times the airports say that they are facing certain financial crunches and they are unable to follow these regulations. So that is why there is a mismatch, administrative mismatch when it comes to security in the airports. Moreover, if you take a look at this, the BCAS, it comes under the Ministry of Civil Aviation. On the other hand, the CISF, which is the major man-force provider to the airports for the security, it comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs. Then the Bureau of Immigration, it is yet another body. It is another body after BCAS, CISF and the airports of India. Now this Bureau of Immigration, it again comes under the Ministry of Home Affairs. On the other hand, there is Customs Department, and this comes under Ministry of Finance. So there is a lot of scatteredness that is seen in this sector in India. Also, right now, the CISF, that is the Central Industrial Security Force, it covers only 66 airports of India. While the rest of the 140 airports of India, they are covered by the state police personnel in the respective state. So there is another fragmentation of security infrastructure as we see in the Indian airports. So first let us talk about the TSA. We have talked about what is the need for it because there is a lot of fragmentation that can lead to many security lapses. The TSA, the Transport Security Authority, it was established after the 9/11 attacks on USA. So it comes under the Department of Homeland Security. The equivalent to that in India would be Ministry of Home Affairs. Now this agency, this authority, it oversees the security of all modes of transportation, including air travel, passenger rail travel, as well as the bus travel. So on basis of this, we are trying to have our own authority for entire transport sector's security. Now this authority, it will subsume even the customs as well as the immigration, apart from the security at the various airports and eventually the other transport sectors. Now right now, what is the status of the Indian aviation sector? We'll take a look at this. It is the world's fastest growing aviation sector in the world. It is growing at the rate of 9%. However, when we compare this to the growth of passenger traffic in Indian aviation sector, it is only at 2%. So that is why it is said that there is a big scope, big room of improvement for improving the passengers in the air sector in India. Okay. So by the year 2024, it is expected that India will become the third largest aviation sector globally. We are already the third largest domestic aviation market in the world. We are just behind USA and China in this regard. Now the total number of airports, they will be increased to 220 by the year 2025. Our fleet of the planes that we have, it is also growing rapidly. If you remember, just in February 2023, Tata's Air India, they ordered 470 aircrafts to rapidly expand their fleet. Out of these, 220 were from the US company Boeing, while the rest of them, 250 were from European Airbus. Okay, so our fleet is also rapidly growing. So if we want to increase our civil aviation infrastructure, the share of this sector in the Indian economy, then we'll definitely have to focus upon its security as well. Now let us talk in brief about CISF. This information, it will be extremely useful for you, especially in your mains. Now CISF, or the Central Industrial Security Force, it is a central armed police force of India. So it was established through the CISF Act of the year 1968 in the year 1969. The major purpose of establishing this agency was to provide security to the various public sector enterprises of India. Later, this was expanded and it now secures the critical infrastructure of India. What does that include? Critical infrastructure include the nuclear power plants, other power plants, then the space agencies, and so on. So there are many critical infrastructure that is also protected by the CISF. Later, there was another addition made to the functioning of CISF. For a fee, the private sector, they could also employ the CISF for their own protection, for the protection of their establishments. Okay. So in 1999, in fact, there was another amendment to the CISF Act which allowed it to provide technical consultancy services to the private sector, again in exchange for a fee. So 13 areas were identified where the CISF could provide these consultancy services. What are these areas? Some of them include threat perception and risk analysis, security and fire audit, document security, crisis management schemes, man-force requirement, and so on. So 13 such areas were identified, and the CISF, it also became a consultancy, it also started giving consultancy to the private sector. So that was about the first topic, that is India is trying to mull for a new security agency, especially for its airports and in general for its transport sector. Now we move to the second article, none too soon. So this article is broadly talking about the Article 200 of the Indian Constitution and the governor's powers. So what is it about? The Supreme Court has given a statement on what topic? The Telangana government, it had gone to the Supreme Court against the inaction on several bills by the governor, Dr. Tamilisai Sundararajan. So according to them, the governor was sitting on many bills and she was not taking action on any of them. However, this appeal was rejected by the Supreme Court because the governor said that she did not have any pending bills with her when this hearing was going on. So what did the court say exactly? While rejecting this appeal, the court made a very important observation. It said that the phrase "as soon as possible" mentioned in Article 200 shows the sense of immediacy in the matters of returning non-money or the ordinary bills for reconsideration to the State Assembly. Now Article 200, it gives the powers to the governor regarding the passage of bills. Now under this, the article says that provided that the governor may, as soon as possible after the presentation to him of the bill for assent, return the bill if it is not a money bill with a message requesting that it needs to be reconsidered. So there is this term, as soon as possible after the governor gets the bill. So the Supreme Court said that the governors of the state, they cannot sit on these bills for an indefinite amount of time. There should be a time period prescribed within which they should do the work. They have not, the Supreme Court has not prescribed any time period. They have just mentioned that as soon as possible. It means that this should be done with immediacy, with as soon as possible, at the earliest. So Article 200, it gives the governor a power to either grant assent to any bill, withhold the assent, return for reconsideration by the legislature, or reserve that particular bill for the consideration of precedent. So this can include any bill that is passed by state legislature and presented to him. So when we talk about governors sitting on those bills, we talk about something called pocket veto. So let us take a look at the various veto powers. Are they or are they not available to the governors of India? So when we talk about the vetoes, first there is absolute veto, which means withholding the assent to any bill. However, the governors of India, they cannot use this particular veto in an absolute sense. They can withhold the assent only after the Council of Ministers have asked them to. Now, when can Council of Ministers ask them to withhold the assent? They can ask them when they think that there was a sudden passage of the bill. They were not able to consider certain aspects of the bill and they would like to do that. They can also do it when the bill was introduced in the previous Lok Sabha and now the government has changed, but the bill is pending with the president for his or her assent. In that case also, the Council of Ministers may or may not ask the governor to, sorry, I talked about Lok Sabha, it should be Legislative Assembly. We are talking about states. So in that case also, the governor can be asked by the Legislative Assembly or the Council of Ministers, by the Council of Ministers, to not give the assent to that particular bill. Then there is suspensive veto. This is valid only in case of ordinary bills and not in case of money bills. Now in suspensive veto, the governor has the power to return the particular bill for reconsideration. However, if this bill comes back to them, they will have to give assent to the bill. Next, we have the pocket veto. Under the pocket veto, this particular phrase, it becomes important. Why? Because pocket veto means that the bill can be kept pending for an indefinite period of time. The governor will neither reject it, nor they'll accept it, nor they'll send it back. So it will stay in an immobile situation. It won't move anywhere. When it comes to president, now the governor, they can send certain bills to the president of India for their assent. Now what about president? Now the president, they can refuse the assent not only in the first time but also the second instance once the bill is sent back to the president after making requisite changes that were asked by them. Okay. Now when we talk about presidential vetoes, here is a comparison. Now president also has almost all these vetoes. Now pocket veto in regards to India versus US is different, because in US there is a definite time period that has been prescribed within which the president of the USA either has to agree to the bill, reject the bill, or send it back for the reconsideration. So the pocket veto thing that we have in India is not available in the USA. So when you talk about the comparison of the constitutions across the world, this fact will come in handy. Now we can also talk about here about the discretionary powers that the governors of India have. First, we'll talk about the constitution. What all discretionary powers they have been given to the governor by the Constitution of India. First is, they can on their own decide whether or not they want to reserve a particular bill for president's consideration or not. So this is under Article 200. They also may or may not recommend president's rule in any particular state under Article 356. The demand for administrative legislative information can be made by the governor of any state to the chief minister of that state. They can ask for any type of legislative or administrative information and the chief ministers will have to provide that information. So this is under Article 167. Now in certain special states, Tamemi, that is Tripura, Assam, Meghalaya and Mizoram. So in these states, under the 6th schedule, these states, wherever there is any kind of mining going on in these states, then the miner, they have to provide certain royalties to the tribal district councils. So the governor of the state, they have the power to decide what is the amount of royalty that needs to be provided to these TDCs by the minors. Apart from that, if the governor, they get the additional charge of any surrounding union territory or any union territory, then they would not have to follow the aid and advice of the particular state. For example, if the governor of Maharashtra, they get the charge of the union territory of Daman and Diu, then this governor, they will not have to depend upon the legislative assembly of the state of Maharashtra in order to take any decisions regarding Daman and Diu. Okay. Apart from that, there are certain situational discretions that are provided to the governor that the governor can actually take care of. One is deciding the chief minister if no party has the majority. If no party has crossed the 50% threshold in the assembly elections, then the governor can choose to call whichever person they want to call for the CM post. However, this person, they will have to carry with them the support of enough MLAs. Apart from that, the dismissal of the Council of Ministers, the governor has the discretion on that only if this Council of Ministers, they lose the confidence vote in the Legislative Assembly. So that is about the discretionary powers of the governor, the veto powers of the governor, and what is the controversy that the Supreme Court has talked about. Next, we come to the Women's Reservation Bill. Now, this topic, it has been in news for a very long time, and in fact, this topic is important not just for your GS1 and GS2, but also for your essay paper. Because UPSC has a pattern that usually they ask at least one women related questions every few years. So let us talk about political reservation for women in India. So currently, in the Indian Parliament, 14% of the sitting MPs, to be very precise, 14.4% of the sitting MPs are women. Compare that to the population of India. Out of the total voters in India, out of the total population of India, 48.39% they are women. Okay, so that raises a question whether or not women are being provided adequate political representation and whether we need to take any steps in regards to that. So what is the history of political reservation for women in India? So women, they have been very active participants of the Indian freedom movement. Rani Lakshmi Bai, Sarojini Naidu, Madam Bhikaji Kama, Annie Besant, Vijay Lakshmi Pandit. There have been so many Indian national movement leaders that were women. So they played a very important part in our freedom. In 1931, for the first time, a memorandum was sent by the women leaders to the British with regards to equal rights for both men and women, and also most importantly, adult franchisee, which should be based or should be adopted without any kind of sex discrimination, so that both the women and men, they have the equal rights to vote. In the year 1955, so this is pre-independence, now we come to the post-independence era. In the year 1955, there was a committee that was appointed by the government with regards to this matter, and this committee suggested that we should have 10% reservation for women in Lok Sabha as well as the state assemblies. In 1988, the National Perspective Plan for Women, it came into being. This plan, it again recommended for reservation for women both in the Lok Sabha as well as the state legislatures. So they asked that there should be 30% reservation for women in these authorities, in these bodies. Then in 1933, for the first time, political reservation for women was done by 73rd and 74th Amendment Act, Constitutional Amendment Acts, and women got 33% reservation in the local bodies of India. Okay, so this was a watershed. This was a watershed moment for the women in India. However, even until now, no reservation was talked about or provided to the women at the state and the central levels. In 1996, for the first time the government tried to introduce a law. So this bill, Women's Reservation Bill, it was introduced in the Lok Sabha, and it required for 30% reservation for women both in Lok Sabha as well as the state legislatures. However, this bill couldn't be passed and it got lapsed as it was pending in the Lok Sabha at that time. In March 2010, just a day after International Women's Day on March 9th, a bill was introduced and eventually it got passed in Rajya Sabha for the same purpose, for reservation, providing reservation for women or representation for women in the central and the state levels. However, the Lok Sabha, it again did not decide upon this bill, and eventually it got lapsed. So what were the major provisions for this? It provided for 33% reservation. Please note that while this bill was providing 30%, it provided 33%, same as the 73rd and the 74th Amendment Acts. So it provided for 33% reservation for women both at the state and the central levels. However, this reservation will only be there for 15 years. So if it would have been passed that year itself in 2010, this reservation would have ended by the year 2025. So it was to be there only for 15 years, after which it will lapse. Moreover, there was a provision of rotation, that the number of seats which are reserved for women, they will be fixed. The numbers will be fixed. However, which seat is there, that will keep on changing. For example, Bangalore Urban, if it is declared as a women's seat in this year, it might change next. For example, it is declared as a women's seat in this central election. It might get changed in the next central election. So there will be some sort of rotation associated with all the seats. So what are the various arguments in favor and against women reservation? In favor, we'll first talk about a particular figure. The Global Gender Gap Report of 2022, it says that India is at 48th position among 150 countries in terms of political participation of women in the country. So when it comes to the total number of members of parliament, which is 14.4% in case of India, we are far behind our neighbors like Nepal, Bangladesh, even Pakistan. When it comes to the state legislatures, this representation is even less. It is just 9%. So that shows that the representation of women compared to the women population, it is very less. Moreover, in 2019's general election, it was the first time that the number of voters, they were equal men and women. So equal number of men and women voted. So there were 50% of women voters. However, the number of MPs that we got, and this is MPs total including Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. So total MPs is just 14.4% in India. Also, in 2019's Lok Sabha election, we're not just talking about how many of them got elected, let's talk about how many of them were fielded. Less than 9% of the fielded candidates by the various political parties all across the country, they were just 9%. So these are same figures, okay? So number of percentage of women in state legislature is also 9%, and in 2019 Lok Sabha, fielded women candidates, their percent was also 9%. Also, another argument in favor is that the women who got a chance to be representatives under the 74th and 73rd Constitutional Amendment Acts at the local government level, they have done some exemplary work, and their example, it can be used to support the argument that if given a chance, the women, they can work in a very good manner when it comes to both central and the state levels as well. Now we come to the arguments which are against this. The first argument is that the women, they are not a homogeneous group like the castes. Now when we talk about the castes, if a particular caste is there, this entire caste, it faced certain kind of discrimination throughout the historical period equally. However, in case of women, it can be different. Some women, they faced discrimination, some did not. Moreover, there is a chance that this thing, it might get monopolized by a certain section of women itself. In general, when we talk about the feminist movement all across the world, it is often said that feminist movements of the world, they have been captured or monopolized by the rich white women. While the black women, women who are poor, or those who belong to the LGBTQ community, they have been left behind. So that can also be a case over here, that certain pockets of women, they might get benefited while the others will not. Also, as we have seen in case of panchayats, there is a concept of sarpanch pati, right? So in the similar way, the women, they might just end up being the puppets in the hands of the male members of their families. So unless women are properly educated, they know about their powers, they know about their rights, they will end up being puppets in the hands of other people. Moreover, the political parties, they need to take the initiative. If they are fielding so less number of women in the elections, then definitely less number of women will get elected in the state legislatures or even the central level, right? So the political parties need to take this initiative to give tickets, more and more tickets to women candidates so that they get a chance and they get elected as representatives. Now, while we were talking about this, there was this argument that in Lok Sabha, twice, this bill has lapsed. So when does a bill lapse? We'll just take a look at that. Now on the dissolution of the Lok Sabha, following bill, they will lapse. Those which are introduced in the Lok Sabha and are pending. Those which are introduced in and passed by Rajya Sabha but are pending in Lok Sabha, they will also be lapsed. Third is introduced and passed by the Lok Sabha but are pending by Rajya Sabha. Those which are introduced in and passed by the Rajya Sabha, amended by the Lok Sabha and passed, and then pending final assent in Rajya Sabha. There is an easy way to learn this. First stage is entered Lok Sabha, pending. Second is introduced and passed in Lok Sabha but not in Rajya Sabha. Third is introduced in Rajya Sabha, passed in Rajya Sabha but pending in Lok Sabha. And the fourth stage is introduced, passed in Rajya Sabha, introduced in Lok Sabha, amended, passed but pending with Rajya Sabha. So these are the 4 types of bills that might get lapsed if the Lok Sabha it gets dissolved. However, there are certain bills that won't lapse. When we were talking about the absolute veto, we talked about a case when the bill is with the president or with the governor. So here, because we are talking about Lok Sabha, let us talk about president. So the bill is with the president for their approval. It has been passed by both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. If the Lok Sabha changes, the new government, the new council of ministers, they might ask the president to not agree to that particular bill, right? So that means that any bill which is pending president's approval or has been returned by him for reconsideration, they will not get lapsed. Also, any bill which is pending in Rajya Sabha and not passed by Lok Sabha, it will also stay. If the joint sitting for any particular bill, if the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, they do not agree on a bill, the president can ask for a joint sitting. So if the joint sitting is notified by the president before the Lok Sabha dissolved, for example, the joint sitting, it was asked on 9th April. And Lok Sabha, it was not just asked, it was notified on 9th April. And Lok Sabha, it dissolved on 15th May, before the joint sitting could take place. So in that case, that particular bill for which the joint sitting was organized, it will not get lapsed. Also, the pending bills and assurances under a committee of the parliament, the committee of assurances, which are being examined by this committee, they will also not lapse. Okay, so these are the bills that will lapse. These are the ones that will not lapse. So after this, we move on to the next topic. The IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, has predicted that more heat wave days will be experienced in the eastern parts of the country in the month of May. So this is a very surprising fact that generally when you talk about heat waves, you mostly think about the northwestern and the central parts of India, right? So generally the hotter regions of India, these hotter regions of India, they experience more heat waves compared to the eastern parts of India. But this time what is happening? The generally hotter regions, they will experience lesser heat waves and more than normal rains in the month of May. Compare that to other regions like Northeast, East Central and Southern Peninsula, they will experience below normal rains. And when we talk about heat waves in these areas, in the Eastern India and parts of Central India, there will be an increase in the number of heat waves. Now heat waves, when they are associated with humidity, this is a worst combination. Now usually a body, it sweats and this sweat gets evaporated, so a body gets cooled down, right? However, when there is humidity in the atmosphere along with a large amount of heat, then your body will not evaporate that sweat. Your body will not get cooled down. It will start getting hotter and hotter and you will experience extreme heat strokes. So that is why this is the most deadly combination, heat plus humidity. Now in general, this is just a fact that on an average, India experiences more heat waves during the El Nino year. Now this year, it has been said with more than 50% probability that we'll have an El Nino year. Since 2019, we had La Nina, which has finally now changed to El Nino. Now in general, when we talk about heat waves in India, the average length of the heat waves, it is 2 to 4 days, right? However, in central and northwest India, it can be up to 6 days. And in coastal Andhra Pradesh, it can go on till 8 days. Okay, so this is the data from IMD itself. Now, when do we declare a heat wave? This is a general information which has already been covered multiple number of times. However, quickly I'll repeat it. That heat wave is considered when the maximum temperature of a station reaches beyond, in the plains, 40 degree, in the hilly regions, 30 degree. So first condition is this. This should be accompanied by another condition, that the departure from the normal, it is 4.5 degree centigrade to 6.4 degree centigrade. If both these conditions are fulfilled, then it is declared as a heat wave. If this departure is more than 6.4 degrees Celsius, then it is a severe heat wave. However, in terms of absolute temperature, there is another criteria, that if the absolute temperature of any place, it goes beyond 45 degrees Celsius, greater than or equal to, then this will be a heat wave condition, and if it is more than equal to 47 degree, this will be a severe heat wave. Now this condition, it should be there at least for 2 consecutive days. If it is just for one day, it won't be a heat wave. It will be just a heat condition. If it is there for 2 consecutive days on at least 2 stations in the meteorological subdivision, then only it can be declared as a heat wave. In the coastal regions, there is another criteria, that when the maximum temperature departure is 4.5 degrees Celsius or more from the normal, then it is a heat wave condition. However, if the absolute temperature, it goes beyond 37 degrees or more, then it is a heat wave condition in the coastal regions. So I hope this is clear to all of you. Now we'll talk about the growing threat of heat waves in India. So if you see this data, between 1980 to 1999, India had around 9.9 heat waves per year. Now this rapidly increased, more than doubled between 2000 to 2019. It increased to 23.5 heat waves per year between this time period. Now IMD, it has recently published a study on 26th April 2023. Now it said in this report that both the frequency, the number of times the heat wave will come, and the duration, the number of days the heat wave will stay, both of them, they are increasing over the central part of India, northwestern parts of India, coastal Andhra Pradesh as well as Odisha. If you see about the duration between the years 1961 to 2021. In this duration, the duration of heat waves in India, it has increased by 2.5 days. In fact, by the year 2060, there will be an increase in the number of heat waves. 2 more heat waves will be experienced per season. And the duration will also increase by 12 to 18 days. So in this duration, while the duration of heat waves has increased by 2.5 days, by 2060 it will increase by 12 to 18 days. So that is a very serious problem in front of India. Moreover, the heat waves, they can also expand to areas which do not generally experience heat waves, especially the southern parts of India. So they can expand to these regions as well. There is another study by Lancet. So Lancet is a very prominent British publishing house. It's not a publishing house, it is a very prominent British agency. Okay. So according to a report by Lancet, which was released in October 2022, in India by the year 2050, there will be a 3 to 4 times increase in heat waves. So 3 to 4 times, if we are experiencing 2 right now, By 2050, we will experience 6 such waves or 8 such waves. There will be a rise in deaths due to heat waves as well. 55%. In fact, if you see the figures, 55% rise has already been seen between 2004 to 2017-2021 due to heat waves. So this is not very far behind, okay? 2000 was just 23 years ago. So within this duration of 2004 to 2017-21, the increase in the heat waves related deaths, they have been very high. There has also been an economic cost associated with it. There was a loss of 167.2 billion potential labor hours in 2021 alone. Moreover, the income equivalent of about 5.4% of country's GDP was also lost due to these heat events. There is another report that we can talk about, a very recent report released on 20th April. So we are just talking about the very recent reports that you can give an example in your answers. The Cambridge study, it said that 90% of the population of India, it will be more vulnerable to 3 things. Health related issues due to directly as an impact of heat waves, food shortages due to impact of these heat waves and heat conditions on agriculture, and the risk of death, both due to heat as well as malnourishment. So 90% of our population, you know that we are now the most populous country. So 90% of the population of the most populous country of the world, it will be susceptible to these types of problems. In fact, by 2050, the Indian heat waves, they might surpass the limit of survivability for healthy humans resting in shade. That means that any human that ventures out into the sun, they might instantly get heat strokes and they might just collapse over there itself. They might not survive such an event. Extreme heat like this, we have already seen in Lancet report, what is the impact, what has been the impact of heat related events on the economy of India, right? So such extreme heat events, they might hold back the growth potential of India, and they will also challenge our ability to achieve the sustainable development goals. And because we are the most populous country of the world, even the sustainable development goals of the world as a whole, they might get disturbed because of this problem. So what is the solution? The biggest solution is providing early warning systems. Now IMD, it already provides such warnings. They release yellow, orange and red alerts in case of any kind of heat wave or cold wave conditions, right? They are already doing that, but the gap between the alert and the actual event is just 1 week. So we need to develop certain technologies so as to increase this gap. Then increasing the public awareness. The people, they should not venture out, they should consume a lot of fluids. What all should they do? What all should they avoid in case any such alert has been issued by the IMD? There needs to be development of heat resilient infrastructure, well ventilated buildings, perpendicular to the flow of air so that air flows within. Having green spaces, planting trees, especially in the urban areas, avoiding glass buildings, because you know that glass buildings, they lead to what? Greenhouse effect. So these kind of heat resilient infrastructures, they can be developed. Work timings can also be modified by the different industries and the different employers so that the people who have to venture out for their work do not have to do so during the peak sunshine hours. So including all of that, we need to develop a comprehensive response plan that apart from including these points, it will also ensure that there is a greater collaboration between the various agencies that are handling any such situations. There also needs to be an increased research and development in this regard, specifically for the health sector, for the medical sector, on how the healthcare sector, it needs to evolve itself, it needs to change itself, it needs to brace itself to this increasing challenge of heat waves in India. Now, within the month of February, in the first week, 1st, 2nd February, there were news that there are going to be cold waves in the northern parts of India, northern and northwestern. By 20th February, this had completely changed to heat waves, heat wave warnings. So you see that the heat waves, they are coming in the months of February itself. Okay, so that is why we need to brace ourselves for this upcoming challenge in order to protect not just the people but also our economy. Now we come to the prelims bites. The first is regarding the core sectors of economy. Now there are 8 sectors that are considered as core sectors, core industries. Okay, so these industries, they act as a feeder for other industries. They provide the raw material that goes into the other industries. So that is why they are known as the core industries. So recently, according to the data that has been released by the Office of Economic Advisor, there has been seen a dip in the growth of these core sectors in the month of March. So this data that we get, it is year-on-year data. So that means that compared to March 2022, there was a dip that was seen in March 2023. So these sectors, these 8 sectors of these 8 industrial sectors, they have 40.27% of weightage when we talk about the index of industrial performance. What are these sectors? This is important for your prelims. We have coal, crude oil, natural gas, refined petroleum, fertilizers, steel, cement, electricity. You can see that all of them, they can act as raw materials for the upcoming industries, for the rest of the industries. So this index, it is released by the Office of Economic Advisor that comes under the Department for Promotion of Industries and International Trade, okay, and which comes under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. The base year for this data, which was changed in the year 2017, is 2011 and 12. The IIP, it is calculated by another agency. It is not the same Office of Economic Advisor that is releasing this data. IIP is calculated by the CSO, Central Statistical Organization. So please keep this difference in your mind. The second one is about Raja Ravi Verma. So today on 29th April 2023, we are celebrating the 175th birth anniversary or 175th birthday of Raja Ravi Verma. So he was born in the year 1848 and he was a part of aristocratic family of Travancore. So Raja Ravi Verma, he was also known as the father of modern Indian art. He painted approximately 7,000 paintings. And on the 175th birthday of this exemplary person, the last painting by Raja Ravi Verma, that is Parsi Lady. It will be up for public display. He was an important painter of the Europeanized school of painting in India. He was very well known for the Western classical representation of Indian gods and goddesses. So you know that Western classical paintings, how they used to look. So he tried to draw the Indian gods and goddesses in the same manner. So this was the first person who made this attempt of drawing Indian gods and goddesses in that particular style. He was also exemplary in another aspect. He was one of the first Indian painters to ever use oil paints. Apart from that, he also established his own printing press. He set up his own lithographic press in India. So this helped in making copies of his paintings so that these copies, they could be distributed amongst the people. People could buy these copies. So established 2 printing presses in India, in Ghatkopar and in Lonavala. In the year 1904, he was also given the Kaisar-e-Hind gold medal by the British Indian government. So that is all about today's Hindu news analysis. We have a few mains practice questions over here. Let us take a look at them. Analyze the need for women reservation in the Indian context. Enumerate the efforts made in this regard. So when you have to analyze anything, you have to give its positives, its negatives. You have to give arguments in favor and arguments against. So that has already been covered, right? So you can start the answer by why women reservation is needed in India, because Global Gender Gap Index, it says that women, that in political representation aspect, India's rank is lagging. Okay, only 14.4% of Indian women, they are present in the, only 14.4% of our MPs, they are women. Okay, so then you can also enumerate the various efforts that have been made in this regard. You can start pre-independence and post-independence. And do not forget to mention especially the 73rd and 74th Amendment Acts. Next is, India is on a high risk situation due to heat waves in the future. Elaborate. Now you have a lot of reports that have been discussed in this session with which you can elaborate this answer. You need to mention the various increase in duration, increase in frequency, impact on people, as well as impact on economy. So you need to cover all these aspects when you are trying to elaborate this particular statement. They have given you a statement, you just have to prove that this statement is right by giving proofs in favor of it. Okay? So with that, we come to an end to today's Hindu news analysis. I hope you were able to understand all the concepts. So thank you very much and have a very good day ahead.